Respected Chief Guest of the morning, Mr. Subroto Bagchi, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor W. N. Gade, faculty members of the university, and my fellow students. Good morning, and welcome to our today's session on driving innovation. I would like to begin by honoring our guests for today for giving us their precious and valuable time. I request our Vice Chancellor, Professor W. N. Gade, to please welcome Mr. Subroto Bagchi, the Chairman of Mindtree, and our Chief Guest for today with a bouquet of flowers. We are also glad to have with us today Mrs. Sushmita Bagchi, an author, and ma'am also works for social causes for the rights of differently abled children. I will request our Vice Chancellor to please welcome ma'am. We also take this opportunity to welcome our other guests for this session and would request our Vice Chancellor to please welcome Mr. Abhay Patil. And our other guest, Mr. Chinmay Bhagwat. I would request sir to please welcome him. Thank you, sir. We would also like to welcome Mr. Kiran Bhagwat to the session as well. And please, I request for Vice Chancellor to address him. Thank you, sir. I would now request our Vice Chancellor, Professor W. N. Gade, to address us. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. This is indeed great honor for me to welcome here Mr. Subroto Bagchi, Chairman, Mindtree Limited. It has been going on for quite some time, almost about more than a month, 1.5 months or 2 months since we have been discussing to have Mr. Bagchi here and address the students and the faculty members. The type of a profile that we have for Mr. Bagchi, that is, highly motivating for any young mind. And I sincerely wanted that he should come over here and talk to the students. And I thank all those people who have been involved in organizing his visit here. And today, particularly, I am happy that Mrs. Bagchi, she is also here. She is accompanying him, and she is also a noted author. And a lot of social work that she has been doing, particularly for the people who are differently abled. A lot of work she has put in. So in both their contribution to the society, social work is a very, very important issue. That has been their main theme. Today also we have with them Mr. Kiran Bhagwat, who is also an entrepreneur, business consultant, and professional coach. He has co-founded Disha Technologies, and he helps young entrepreneurs and non-profit organizations like SOPHOSH, that is the Society for the Sassoon Hospitals, and a lot of social work that he has been carrying it out. I also welcome Mr. Abhay Patil, who is a Senior Vice President of the Harbinger Group, who drives the talent management and operations. Also welcome Chinmay Bhagwat, Vice President, Mindtree. He also is involved in today's organizing of this lecture, particularly the question and answer on these things. So he is worthy colleague of Mr. Bagchi. As far as Mr. Bagchi is concerned, as you all know, he is a very successful entrepreneur, business leader, a thought leader, chairman of Mindtree, one of the best software companies, which he co-founded in 1999. And before Mindtree, he has a long tenure with Wipro as the Chief Executive Officer for their global R&D. He is also known to the larger world, as I said, thought leader, thinker, prolific writer, voracious reader. He is a columnist, writes in Times of India, Business World, also Forbes. And his books as well as his writings is very well appreciated. Everybody knows about that. His books on entrepreneurship, professionalism, organizational scaling, management are the best sellers. These also demonstrate his keen observation power, sharp analytical acumen, and superb storytelling. So we have such a great person today to deliver this talk. And today he is going to talk about, let us talk innovation. And innovation is the most important topic for us on this university campus nowadays. Because all of you know that we are trying to make significant mark on international level in the area of research. There are a lot of schemes that we have launched to promote research in various fields, not only science or social sciences, but in the areas of business administration, management, law, pharmacy, and whatnot. So today he is going to cover many aspects of innovations, like what is innovation, what is not innovation, what are various facets of innovation, who can innovate, how to innovate, and what is the impact of innovation. He will share a lot of examples related to innovation, varying from day-to-day life, from the simplest to the most advanced ones. One of the messages that he gives is that innovation is more of a state of being than a goal to aspire for. So we welcome him today, and we thank him for his passion and guidance from his hectic and busy schedules. So I will request all of you to give him a big hand and welcome him here. And I now invite Mr. Bagchi to deliver his talk.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gade and friends. This is a subject on which we can spend a whole day, maybe a whole week, maybe even a whole month, maybe a lifetime. So I have this short window to talk to you about the subject. And I'll just open your mind to 10 ideas, 10 broad paths for understanding the nature of innovation. So more than anything else, we'll talk about the nature of innovation. The first and most important thing is to understand that innovation actually has absolute close linkage to the idea of creativity. You cannot think of innovation without creativity. The thing is, where does creativity stem from? Creativity essentially stems from innocence. An innocent mind is a creative mind. If you don't have innocence, you simply cannot be creative. Now, this has got something to do deeply with being a child. And a child's mind is a creative mind. And it is creative because the child is also a very spontaneous being. Now, as we grow up, we lose spontaneity. We look down upon spontaneity. But if you look at creative geniuses all over the world, or creative people, not just geniuses, they're comfortable being spontaneous. So creativity comes from in a state of innocence, and that innocence is nurtured through a spontaneous mind. Now, the interesting thing to ask ourselves is every child is genius-like, is creative, spontaneous, has all the ingredients. And what happens to us when we become adults? There's a lot of study that has happened which are longitudinal in nature, and some of them have come from Stanford University. One of the greatest study of genius level intelligence that has happened spans more than 80 years. So what has happened is a control group of young people have been tracked from the time that they were 5, had higher than normal intelligence, and that group today is in their 80s. So it's phenomenal, and you have to have that long view of time to understand some of the complex issues of the human mind, which then led to subjects like innovation. Now, this study, which started sometime in 1910 and is ongoing, is continuing, indicates that a lot of people with genius level intelligence fall off later in life. As you progress from being a 5-year-old to a 15 to 20 to 40, you simply fall off. So what happens? One argument is that you go to school and then you go to college, okay? But there is a merit in that argument. What happens in most educational systems, we teach what is called reductive thinking. We like to reduce everything to things. So I walk into this room, and the first thing that occurs to me is that it is a room of a certain dimension. There's a roof here. The roof is meant of cement concrete. Then there's a stage here, which is reductive thinking. As against this, if we look at creativity and innovation, it stems from what is called wonder, not reductive thinking. So if somebody who's creative and is innovative will come into this room and say, wow, what a nice room. Could we actually have a play here? Does this room allow itself to think differently? Could this room have been better designed for the kind of spirit that the University of Pune symbolizes? Okay. So as you can see, they're very two different, distinctive way of thinking. A child has a sense of wonder. You can see this kid. The kid has no clue what he is doing actually. It could be some borrowed stuff from mother's kitchen. The ill-fitting apron is stolen from sister's cupboard. Okay, but the child is having a good time. The child is in a state of wonder. The most innovative ideas, breakthroughs come by releasing the mind from reductive thinking to saying, oh my God, what is possible? The second very important thing that we have to keep in mind is innovation starts with inclusion. People who innovate include other people into their lives, into their thought process, into their thinking. So it's not a selfish process. You have to think for somebody. You have to think for someone. And I could again dwell a lot on this, but I will try and simplify. If you look at this matrix here, the purpose of particularly entrepreneurs, the purpose of organizations is essentially to create value over time. Our job is to create as much value as we can over as much time as possible. Now we can create value over time by continuously engaging with our known customers and our known suppliers. You don't have to be hugely innovative in dealing with your known customers and suppliers. As long as you're adding some value, you're okay. So imagine that you buy a surf and then it is after some time that surf will come and say, so isme nimbu wala jhag hai. Okay. Now who cares if there's nimbu wala jhag or not, but there is some incremental idea there. Then you come and tell your customers that I'll give you 25% free for the same price, and the customer is happy. You don't have to completely change the molecular making of the detergent. So you don't have to innovate in a big way. But the moment we deal with the customer's customer or the supplier's supplier, the dynamic changes because we don't really know that world. And in that world, for us to think of creating value over time, we have to go back to the child state, because suddenly you realize that you don't know anything. So the best fallback you have is innocence and curiosity. And the best fallback you have is a sense of wonder and say, oh, so what could be done? So when people deal with somebody twice distanced as you are, so just imagine that the Pune University or any great university is focused on the students that come there. Now that is great, we will create a lot of value over time. But if I leave some focus, not just to the student, but to schools that produce those students, then you are actually twice removed. And then you realize that, oh my God, last time I was in high school myself, I'm a professor here, that was a long time ago. So I'm out of depth. So I begin to then keep my mind open. I begin to start thinking in terms of wonder, and then that is where breakthrough ideas come from. But this requires also what is called existential thinking. Now this terminology was brought out in the innovation context by a great academic for whom I have huge respect. And his name is Professor Yves Dawes. Professor Yves Dawes is one of the probably 5 greatest thinkers in the area of knowledge management. And his ideas about innovation in a multinational and what is called a metanational context was taken with great interest. And he teaches in INSEAD. And he came out with a very interesting model. If you look at all of us in this room, we are essentially knowledge workers. We consume knowledge and we create knowledge. So we consume knowledge and we create knowledge, and through that knowledge, whether I'm a researcher in the university here, or I'm an MBA who will be absorbed by the industry, or I'm a teacher, when you create knowledge, you have to continuously relate to the idea or the body of knowledge. Now we relate to the idea of knowledge at 3 different layers in our own minds. At the lowest layer or lowest level at which we relate to a body of knowledge is called the technical layer. It is reductive thinking basically. So I walk into this room and I look at the technical specifications. Okay. So a foreign customer comes and says, here's a pen, and can you make this pen lighter, and can you make this pen more lasting in terms of its ink dispersal, and make it cheaper, and this is the specification. So the customer or the outside agent is giving the specification with which then I produce something. So it is the lowest form at which I can relate to knowledge. The task of thinking through the big picture is somebody else. This is also called the engineering layer. And this is also called the adaptive layer, and this is the layer at which people have reverse engineering. And as a country, we are known to be producing a lot of people who operate at the technical layer, are more comfortable doing reverse engineering than to be thinking differently. At the next higher layer than this is what Yves Dawes calls the experiential layer. Now here, you are not dealing with specification. Nobody is telling you what to do. But what you do is you imagine what does it mean to be somebody else. That somebody else could be a customer, could be an end user. Okay. I'm using the word customer in not necessarily a business sense, so please bear with me on that. So for a teacher, the student is a customer. Okay. For the the householder, the maid in some cases is the customer. Okay. For the municipal garbage worker, the household is a customer. So let's look at the word customer in a very different, in a Gandhian sense, if you will. So you basically step into the shoe of the customer to understand what does it mean. Where does it hurt? Where are the possibilities? And nobody is telling, the customer is not telling you that go and create something. Nobody went to, for example, Steve Jobs and said, we need an iPad. This is the specification with which an iPad or an iPod or an iPhone should be created. For understanding the experiential layer, Yves Doss gives a very, very interesting example of Nissan. Nissan wanted to design a car for the European market. So Nissan did not do the following. Nissan did not say, so bring downloadable images of 6 different kinds of cars and take the tail light of one. It looks nice. Take the wipers of another. It looks cool or has a cool functionality. Borrow the seat design from somebody else, do a mishmash, and there is a car for the European market. It could have done the same thing with its existing models. What Nissan did was something very interesting. They flew down a couple of hundred engineers to Europe. They got down at Frankfurt airport, and they rented different makes of cars, rental cars, and drove off in different directions. And each group drove for 2,500 kilometers to understand not car design, not car mechanics, but to understand what does it take to be a motorist in Europe. So those of you who know Europe, the thrills and the challenges of driving on the Autobahn are very different from the thrills and challenges of driving up the Alps. The thrills and challenges of driving up the Alps in summer and winter and night and day cause a very different levels at which you need to relate to knowledge. So what these people did is they drove all over Europe, suspending the idea of automobile design, but only creeping into the shoe of the customer, stepping into the shoe of the customer, came back, put their knowledge together, and that's how Nissan designed a car for the European market. So that is where Nissan designers are relating to the idea of knowledge at an experiential level. But the next higher level is what Yves Doss calls is the existential layer. So at the bottom layer, you are dealing with specifications. At the intermediate layer, you are dealing with the idea of stepping into the shoe of a customer. But the topmost layer, you don't just step into the shoe of the customer. You actually creep into the mind of the customer, which is a very different thing. So, for example, Sony is Sony not because it understands ferrite magnet technology that go into the boom boxes. Sony is Sony not because it understands supply chain. Sony is Sony because Sony knows when a young person dons headphones and listens to music, what is happening in the head of the young person. And Sony works backwards from that sensation, that immersive idea of music, listening to music in your own private space to the exclusion of the entire cosmos. And from there, they come out with product and service ideas. Now, the interesting thing is that there's a glass ceiling that separates each of these layers. So by doing great technical layer thinking, we will one day not break through and be able to creep into the shoe of the customer. And the same thing applies between the experiential layer and the existential layer. You have to think differently. You have to choose at which layer you want to engage and pay the price for it, both in terms of the length of time that you have to work in that layer and the kind of resources that you have to engage with, and also the risks that you must entail. Because as you go higher, the risks are higher. The risk meaning the risk of failure. Now, many of us in India, the moment we think about innovation, we think about complexity. Only if a problem is complex and is Nobel Prize material that it entails the idea of innovation. I want to tell you that sometimes the greatest innovations in life start with a simple idea. So if you want to look at existential thinking that Yves Doss talked about, they often come from a simple but a powerful idea. To go back to that model, Mercedes-Benz told its engineers that we should not use more than one bucket of water to paint a car. Now that does not come from engineering thinking, that comes from existential thinking, because somebody in Mercedes-Benz is saying the planet has only 2% of its total water body fit for human consumption. We should not be using gallons and gallons of water to clean a car, to paint a car to begin with and then clean a car. So no more than 1 bucket of water. Now you work backwards from there and find out how technologically, from an engineering standpoint and from an adaptive standpoint, how will you make it happen. So it's a simple idea, but it's an idea that completely changes the conversation. Now I'll give you another very interesting example. Now, all of you know about Yamaha, the bike maker in the world, but many people don't know that Yamaha does not design its own bikes. The Yamaha bikes are designed by a much smaller company called Matsuura in Japan. So the last 50 years, Yamaha bikes are designed by Matsuura. And where do Matsuura people get their design ideas from? Not by studying complex, voluminous books on motorcycle design and so on. They spend a lot of time studying the way movements take place in nature. Because a bike is all about movement. Now if you look at a racing bike, it is no different from the picture I'm showing here. If you pay attention to this picture, here's a cheetah who can run at a peak speed of 80 miles per hour, and the gazelle can outrun the cheetah because the cheetah can go from 0 to 80 in a short period of time because of great torque, but does not have sustainable capacity to run at that speed. So what the cheetah does is it confuses the gazelle by turning in the mid-air. And then the gazelle gets confused, and that's how the cheetah pounces on the gazelle. Now, if you look at the challenge of switching directions in mid-air at 80 miles per hour, okay, it can actually blow you apart. So the Matsuura designers look at movements like these when they create breakthrough design in how a racing vehicle must twist and turn at the, in a split second without blowing apart, without causing dislocation between the rider and the bike. Similarly, the Matsuura designers go and spend hours looking at how water falls in a waterfall. So there's a certain amount of movement, there's a certain amount of harmony, and you can't create a bike, a racing bike, or for that matter, a bike for normal use, without understanding the principles of harmony. So they go and spend hours looking at the fall of water in a waterfall. Starts with a simple idea. But why simplicity? You look at this picture here. Now, if I show you this picture, you all know that this is a picture of a baby, and you all know the mood of the baby, right? The baby is happy. The baby is smiling. Now, if I show this picture, not to highly educated people like you, but if I take this picture, show it to a group of illiterate people from an obscure part of the world who do not speak my language, they will still think that it's a picture of a baby and the baby is happy, the baby is smiling. That is the power of simplicity. This is simple communication at its best. So when we can use the power of simplicity, we can communicate the power of a thought. And for understanding that, I want you to see Gandhiji's picture here. Here's a man who was not only simple in his thought, but is so simple in his packaging. Okay? There's nothing complex. I argue that if Gandhi wore a Savile Row suit, we would still be serving the British. Here's a man who is dressed so simply that he's almost naked. That's why they said that he's a naked fakir. Just a loin cloth and another one to cover. Simple one color, monochrome. Pair of glasses with which he can see today, he can see tomorrow, he can see day after tomorrow. And a pair of chappals, and of course missing here is a stick. And this picture is actually taken in London. Now I'll show you another picture here, which is of course the iPod. Okay. Now, if you compare the two pictures, the design similarities between them. So this has got a large display unit. Okay. Here is also a large display unit. You can see Gandhi's glasses. Okay. Here you see a monochromatic design, single color. Originally it was white, all white, and here also there's a monochrome design. Okay. And here, if you look at Gandhiji's chappals, they're so simple as forms of footwear. Okay. All he had to do is plug his legs in these chappals, and these chappals would then carry him to Birmingham Palace, outside of which this picture is taken. And you could wear this chappal and go to Noakhali, and you wear this chappal and go to meet the Viceroy. So this chappal should take him wherever he wants to go. So look at the dial here. Okay, the dial are like Gandhi's chappals. They can take you forward, they can take you backward, they can take you up, they can take you down. And until Apple came through this simple breakthrough idea, it was all about keyboards. Okay. So the power of simplicity is underappreciated in India. Complex is not necessarily cool. Simple is cool. The breakthrough may not be in complexity. The breakthrough, the principle of breakthrough may come when we have a childlike state of mind and childlike simplicity in our thinking. Now, you might have heard about, no, I'm sure you have heard about, I'm sure all of you have the Aadhaar card, right? Okay. The Aadhaar card is the child of the UID program, and the Aadhaar software engine was developed by Mindtree. Now, it's a very simple idea. The idea was that 1.3 billion people, if you look at the population, of which more than half cannot open a bank account because they cannot prove to the bank manager who they are. It is easy for you and me to prove who you and I are because I have a passport, you have a driving license. You know, if we don't have that, we have the postal address at which we live. But for majority of Indians, they can't come into mainstream banking and as a result lose the many benefits of banking because they can't prove who they are. So the idea in Nandan Nilekani's mind was, even before we solve larger problems, Indians must be able to prove identity. It started with a very simple idea. Now similarly, one of the biggest innovative breakthroughs that we are experiencing as a company is we started a program called I Got Garbage. Now this is a program, it is actually not a program, it's a platform. It links garbage pickers with households that generate garbage and wholesale purchasers of garbage. So just to give you a sense here, in Bangalore city alone, there are 26,000 garbage pickers. And in the country, there are more than a few million garbage pickers. A garbage picker, on an average, is initiated into the profession of garbage picking by the time he or she is 11 or 12. If you're a male garbage picker, your life span is no more than about your early 30s, because you work hungry, you smoke gum, you work in unhygienic conditions, and you are a prey for all kinds of people when you are on the streets. And if you're a woman garbage picker, the chances are very high that by the time you're 21, 22, you already have 3 or 4 children, and by the time you are in your late 20s, you're a prime candidate for cervical cancer. So if you look at this whole group of people, they serve a very important purpose. They take over where governments fail. They take over where municipalities fail. But we don't necessarily look at them as entrepreneurs. So I want you to show you a very short film where you will understand what is the simplicity of an idea. That's your landfill. This is where the garbage picker works. Usually there's even a child. And then takes it to a recycle market. Lives on the street. This is a real platform. Segregation.
Wow! Act now. Hire a rack picker. Visit www.igotgarbage.com.
So this is a great example of a very simple but very powerful idea. What really happened here is when you looked at the 26,000 rag pickers in the city of Bangalore, we said that we need to look at them not as either a problem or a liability of any kind. We need to respect them as entrepreneurs, because this person is starting in the morning, carrying a bag, and not asking for charity, not begging, is not asking for SEZ land, okay, or concessions from the government, or cheap water or cheap power like many industrialists do, okay, is foraging for 12 hours on the street. So why shouldn't we think about this individual as an entrepreneur? And what's the biggest problem that an entrepreneur has? It is about connecting upstream and downstream, which sometimes we call the supply chain. So we basically told ourselves that if we can work to improve the supply chain of a Unilever or a Procter & Gamble, why can't we look at this as a supply chain problem as far as the garbage picker is concerned? So imagine for a day that you are a garbage picker, imagine for a moment that you are a garbage picker. You're carrying that backpack and you are going from point A to B to C to D looking for PET bottles. And from point D you don't find anything and you come back exhausted. But you don't realize that in point E, there may be an apartment complex which is wanting to give PET bottles away, okay, or trade or sell PET bottles away. So we said that we'll build a platform on which the garbage picker is a member and the apartment complex is a member, and large buyers of recyclable garbage are also members. So what now happens is the apartment complex or the individual householder logs on to igotgarbage.com and you say, I want a pickup, this is the kind of thing that I need to be picked up, and the garbage picker has an identity card, goes without wasting time from A to B to C to D, goes straight to the point where the collection is possible. And when you reduce the time that you spend on the street from 12 hours to even 8 hours, this individual is less susceptible to be preyed upon, is less susceptible to crime, can even spend that extra time to play a sport or maybe go to class. So the entire equation changes the moment you understand the power, the equation that simplicity can bring into thinking, whether it's an Aadhaar card or it is I got garbage. Now, the other very important thing that we have to keep in mind is there's a close linkage between innovation and struggle. A lot of us want to innovate, but we want a cushy life. A lot of us want to innovate, but we want job security. A lot of us want to innovate, but we don't like the struggle that comes with innovation. At a fundamental level, at a personal level, and at a level of a nation and society, periods of struggle are inevitably periods that precede a prolonged period of innovation. If you look at the period between the two world wars, it is marked with great struggle and suffering for a lot of humanity. If you look at the millions of people that got exterminated within a very short period of time, is never before in the history of mankind. The 6.5 million people of Jewish origin were exterminated, which is like the whole city of Bangalore. So imagine the whole city of Bangalore just goes away because you're exterminated. So if you look at the period of the suffering between the two world wars and then look at the 3 decades that followed, were one of the richest decades when it came to the idea of innovation. Computers came out during that period. Satellite technology came out during that period. And penicillin came out during that period, which fundamentally changed the way that mankind would shape. If 9/11 would not have happened, and I'm not justifying for a moment that 9/11 should have happened, it shouldn't have happened. But because of 9/11 today, the whole idea of drone technology has got so much fast forwarded and is being today deployed not just for military applications, but for non-military applications as well. So periods of struggle at a personal level and periods of struggle at a collective level inevitably lead to periods of innovation. Innovation also comes from diversity, and I was talking to Dr. Gade before coming here, how diversity is very important to the educational ecosystem and to social ecosystem and industrial ecosystem. Innovation will not come from monochromatic thinking. Monochromatic societies in the world, and I don't want to name them, but you very well can imagine who I'm talking to, is very unlikely that they will come out with innovation. Because innovation depends on multicultural thinking. Innovation depends on people of different kinds coming together. People disagreeing with each other respectfully. That is how alternate viewpoints come up. So diversity is very, very fundamental to innovation. Now, if you look at this picture of parrots here, or parakeets here, the same bird, but so many different kinds of parrots. So they all come from the rainforest. And the rainforest is the richest repository of life on the planet because it thrives on diversity, because it loves diversity. So flora and fauna and the microbes on the rainforest have a very complex equation between each other, and that's what makes the rainforest the richest source of life on the planet. Now take that argument to a city. Now this is a picture of New York City. If you look at any portion of this photograph, of course this is some kind of a celebration happening. It could be a marathon, it could be some kind of a procession, whatever it is. But if you look at any square inch of the photograph, you'll find people of different national origins. You'll find people of different ethnicities. Those of you who have not been to New York, when next time you go there, pay attention to 2 things. When you get into a subway, which is the mass rapid transport system of New York City, sit or stand and just look around, you'll find at least 6 people at any time of the day or night who come from different ethnic backgrounds. Similarly, if you just walk 1 block in New York City, you'll find food from 6 different parts of the world. That is why New York City is the culture capital of the world, because the New York City mimics the biodiversity of the rainforest and is foremost in innovation in a wide array of areas. So that's what makes New York City New York City. The 8th principle that I want to share with you is about personal gratification. A lot of us think that we are innovating or not innovating because of reasons of personal gratification. Now look at this little bee here, who's picking honey from the flower. We can argue that the bee does what it does because it gets rewarded with honey, but the bee is also in the process pollinating. And imagine all the insects in the world take vacation this coming season. You and I would not be in this auditorium discussing about innovation. Okay. So beyond just taking honey out of the flower, the bee has a larger purpose, the purpose of pollinating so that the whole world can get its crops. So it is going clearly beyond the idea of personal gratification. You want to innovate because you want to serve a much larger purpose. So if you look at people here, you know, whether you're looking at Mozart, you're looking at Graham Bell, Madame Curie, you're looking at Da Vinci or Michelangelo, or any of these people. There are people who are seriously committed to bringing goodness to a great number of people. So these are people who have gone well beyond personal gratification. That brings me close to the last two ideas that I want to share with you. In the interest of time, I'm fast forwarding a little bit so that we can have a little conversation afterward as well. And the ninth idea I want to leave behind with you is that innovation is not a state of is a state of being. It's not just a matter of goal or an aspiration, as Dr. Gade pointed out right in the beginning. So in India, you know, strangely we have, when you go to a public sector undertaking and sometimes in private sector undertakings, you will have quality week. You'll have cleanliness drive, okay, which will happen for a week and then everybody will forget it. Now, you can't have a quality week. Quality has to be a state of life. Quality has to be a state of thinking. You must have quality in your breath, quality in your blood. The same thing applies to the idea of innovation. So if you look at our own culture of innovation, you know, when innovation flourished in this country, people are not looking towards a goal. People are not looking towards being patted on the back. People are not looking towards getting an increment and accelerated promotion. People were coming with innovation because that was the only way they could live, they could breathe. It was a state of being, not a goal to be achieved. So that brings us to India. And I personally believe that India's time has come and India's time is now. But if we look at our history, for a long period of time, you know, we have gone into cold storage as a nation when it comes to innovation. The interesting thing you will find here, this is a Konark wheel, more than 1200 years old. This is a stepped well, which you find in Gujarat and also find in the Hampi ruins of Karnataka, and of course the Taj Mahal. Taj Mahal is more than 600 years old, and the Hampi ruins are more than 1,000 years old. These are brilliant pieces of architecture. An architecture which presents itself in 3D has a very high aspirational impact on the mind when it comes to communicating what creativity is and what creativity can do. So architecture is very important. Monument building is very important. Now, if you look at these pieces of architecture, after this, for 600 years, we have not produced an architecture of global significance. People talk about the Baha'i temple in Gujarat, and it is an imitation of the Sydney Opera. So when first thing I came into the Pune University this morning is I looked in wonder, not reductive thinking, but wondrous thinking. I looked at wonder at the main office where the flag is, where the Vice Chancellor sits. And as we walked up the staircase, you know, my mind was racing back to 1864. And my mind is thinking, how many different kinds of people, what greatness has walked on these stairs before us? What more could we be doing with these stairs? So architecture is very important. And for 600 years, we have not produced great architecture. We talk about innovation in science, innovation in areas of complexity, but we need to understand that innovation thrives in a society when there's an ecosystemic view of innovation. So if you look at the period of time in which in each of these places, whether it was Agra or Odisha or Gujarat or Hampi in Karnataka, when architectural brilliance was at play, that was also the time that great poetry was getting written. That was also the time when breakthrough principles of land measurement were coming up. That was also the time when great literature, great drama, great dance forms, and because of dance forms, great percussion instruments were coming into play. So when a society innovates, it seldom innovates in a sliver. Societies experience periods of innovation as ecosystemic periods of innovation. And I believe the time has come And it's not necessary that we just looked at technological breakthroughs. The technological breakthroughs will not happen unless there are breakthroughs in other areas as well. But I keep saying that the time has come, because if you look at these pictures here, whether you are looking at people, I'm sorry with the slides here. If you look at the pictures here, you look at people like, I'm sorry, this is too fast for me. So if we look at, I apologize. This will happen on its own. So this is what happens when you leave things to themselves rather than try to interfere. Okay. So you have people like Meera Nair, people like Jhumpa Lahiri, people like Vikram Seth. What are these people doing? These people are actually, very interestingly today, producing books, poems, and film that is fit for global consumption. For the first time, we are producing art, literature, and cinema. And we should not underestimate them in terms of product complexity. The idea is it's not enough to make in India only for India. We have to make in India for the world. So when we make in India for the world, we have to think of ideas and concepts and create breakthrough designs and produce products which are fit for global consumption. And already, Indian dress designers, when Michelle Obama came, I am told that she was wearing a Bibhu Mahapatra design, okay? Or you have a Sabyasachi, thank you for being there in my life. Where would I be without you? So Indian designers are today holding world stage. Indian literatures are holding world stage. Indian filmmakers are holding world stage. So given that, I think the time has come, and if we understand the fundamental principles behind the idea of innovation and focus on the power of simplicity, create products and services for mass scale adaptation, then there is no reason why the next century will not be an abiding century of great story of innovation from India. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you here. Thank you.
So folks, thanks a lot for that. And now we are getting into the question answer session. And my request is to ask question. If you know about Mr. Bagchi, you can ask questions about anything, not necessarily just related to this presentation on innovation, but of course we can start with the questions on innovation. What I will do is, I will keep taking a couple of questions from this group, and then we'll look at whether there are any questions coming from the Skype. So folks who are listening to this presentation from all over Maharashtra, please send your questions on Skype so that we can include them in this session. Who wants to go first?
And Chinmay, it would be nice if they very quickly introduce themselves. So,
great. Yes.
Good morning, sir. I'm Aishwarya Gowde, a first-year student here at Kumbha. And my question to you, sir, is that in the process of innovation, you have to let go of a few things, unlearn a few things which you have already learned before. And there are parts
next time you should make the presentation. Very nice.
Sir, so there are some habits which you form over a period of time. How do you let go of that? How hard is it to do that?
It is, my dear, very hard, but it is not so hard. Okay, it is hard in a sense. Unlearning is hard in a sense because of the exact term that you used about letting go. It requires us to begin with. It requires us to do what I call deep listening. Most failures in life are actually listening failures. We don't listen. We don't listen to what the market is looking for. We don't listen to what our spouse is asking. We don't listen to what our children may be wanting. We don't listen to what the consumer is saying. And you don't listen with your ears. Actually, you listen with your mind and with your heart. And you listen in silence. If you keep talking, then you will not listen. If you keep talking, you'll only listen to your own voice. So you do the deep listening when you quieten yourself down. When you quieten yourself down, your mind quietens down. And that is the moment where you let go. There's a very great thinker on social transformation. His name is Otto Scrammer. He's a German, but very deeply influenced with Oriental philosophy. And he uses a very interesting term. He says, when you let go, you let come. Okay? Only when you calm your mind down, that ideas will start pouring in from all directions. So the key to opening your mind up is to calming down, have respect for others, and also to learn from unusual sources. Great innovative societies, great innovative people are continuously looking at not the usual sources, because the usual source everybody is looking at. You can do only incremental advances by looking at usual source. So the physicist is in awe of the sculptor, and the sculptor is in awe of the painter, and the painter is in awe of the poet, and the poet is in awe of physics, right? So when that kind of a thing happens, then you are continuously learning from unusual sources. So quieten down, look for ideas, inspirations from unusual sources. And next time you pass by a monument, you pass by a bookstore, you pass by a coffee shop, you pass by somebody who looks different from you, stop for a moment, watch, think, listen deeply. Thank you. This is a great question.
Okay, I don't see a hand here, so let me take a question from the audience. What is the difference between innovation and invention? This question has come from Dhananjay Sathe, Ferguson College.
Dhananjay's question is very typical. A lot of people ask this question. And my question to Dhananjay is, how is it important to answer this question? Why should it be such a, a lot of people spend a lot of time on, defining innovation, invention, how invention is a one-time thing and innovation is a broader thing, and you innovate to invent. But how does it really matter? You could invent to innovate, innovate to, to invent. We tend to, as a nation, get lost in semantics a lot. Don't worry about definitions. Think more of descriptions. It's not necessary to do reductive thinking. It's not important to find the exact definition, exact difference, and having a polemical debate on innovation versus invention. Start somewhere, do something. Start with simplicity.
Thanks. Any question here? Yeah, please.
I'm Professor Subhash Gaisas.
Yes, sir.
From Savitribai, Phule, Pune University. My question is, when we talk of innovations, and if we look at the whole lot of innovations that have taken place, and in particular, let's look at the Nobel Prizes. Since I come from the physics background, I'm aware that, and probably you also, that more than 50% of these Nobel Prizes are gone to Jews.
Jewish people.
Jewish people.
Yeah.
Now, isn't it that probably there is something in their DNAs which works like that? So we have to, we may not probably say that innovation can be practiced, but it should be there. Then you can perhaps polish it.
Sir, actually you bring a very important and a very highly debated idea here. And the idea can lead to sometimes very very dangerous thinking. I'm not saying you are leading to dangerous thinking, because people may say that, when you say that certain people are gifted by a certain DNA to produce something, we're basically disenfranchising a lot of people and saying also racially, there's a racial connection to it, okay? And that can lead to a lot of controversies. But there may even be a scientific truth in it. Why is it that the Marathis are who they are? Why is it that the Rajasthan desert actually creates the best, richest businessmen and women in the world? Okay. Why is it that the southern part of India is architecturally more significant? And I'll make a dangerous statement that a lot of people say that the IT industry is a Tam-Bram industry, Tamil Brahmin industry. Okay. And I'm not a Tam Bram for the record, so please don't misunderstand me. So is there a connection between genetic and, so how is genetic becomes genetic? Is it independent of the food we consume? Is there something to the regionality of a food, and so on and so forth? But at the same time, I think, psychologists, neuroscientists, geneticists are coming together for the first time and sitting around the table to re-initiate a conversation on nature versus nurture. How much of the human brain is nature and how much is it nurture? How much is it DNA and how much is it RNA, for example? Okay. People talk about a DNA a lot, people don't talk about RNA, which can actually suppress the power of a, the power of a DNA to actually course a certain course. But then the brain is also is reputed to be plastic, which means that it can mold itself. And there are more and more evidence that the brain, of which we use less than 10%, has synaptic capability to learn new things. And when you learn new things, you can build ideas on ideas. Okay. So maybe there's a connection, maybe there is no connection. I'm not an authority on that. All I can tell you is that we need to keep an open mind on this conversation. But when people get the opportunity, when societies learn to be tolerant, when right brain activities and left brain activities get equal respect, and a lot of cross-functional, cross-cultural interaction happens, so suddenly it does not become just one community, one set of people, but kind of what we call a groundswell happens. New York City is a groundswell. When I come to Pune each time, I'm actually in wonder and amazement. It is not a random thing that Gandhi was jailed here and Tagore left Shantiniketan to come to Gandhi here. So there is magic, there's some charm, there's a complex ecosystem. Like the work of a microbe in the rainforest, there are microbes at work here. Intellectual microbes, thought microbes, cultural microbes. So something happens when a whole city rises up, beyond ethnicity. So it's a good conversation, sir. Next time we should sit in the canteen and you have to give me some vada pav and we should spend a couple of hours on it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take your question. There is a question on the, there is a question that has come from SPPU Conference 1. And this is from Pranav Patil, a student from Pimpri Chinchwad College of Engineering. What are the innovation opportunities for students in the industries, and are industries providing any platforms?
So, I want to challenge you a little bit here. Okay. So if you look at this picture that I showed you, none of these people were provided any platforms. Always remember that in life there are two kinds of people. Some kind of people are called path makers and some people are called path dependent. The world requires both kinds of people. Now innovators are path makers, they're not path dependent. The moment I start saying what opportunity will industry give, what government sanction is there and government funding is there and plan is there, what motivational and promotional opportunities are there so that I will innovate. It's not going to happen. These are path makers. And usually path makers have been, some of them, many of them have been persecuted in their own land, in their own time. So there was no good wind behind their sail. That's why I said that there's a struggle. You know, when Steve Jobs went into a protracted period of great innovation, prior to that, what happened? He was thrown out of Apple. He was thrown out of the company that he had created by a board that he had brought in. The same board sacked him. And that could have been end of Steve Jobs. The world had actually written Steve Jobs off after he was thrown out of Apple, and he started a computer, he created a computer called Next, a company called Next, and that didn't take off. So if we wait to say what avenues are there in the industry, then we are already talking about path being made by somebody else, and then I rather be path dependent. Innovators defy gravity. Innovators do not wait for the system to provide the sail in the wind.
Thanks. Yeah, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm Professor Joparkar from same university.
Yes, sir.
And this is little continuation with my earlier colleague Dr. Gaisar. Now we often talk that you have to be like that. You have to be, it has to be in your blood. Now I want to ask you, do you imply that innovativeness can be nurtured by systematic training? That is one question. And second is, I would like to have your learned opinion about relationship between serendipity and the innovative.
Very nice, sir, very nice. Sir, if I forget, I'm also a little professorial, so I may forget. Please remind me of the second one. So let's talk about blood. You know, let me talk about my blood. I come from a lower middle class family. My father was a government servant. You know, my mother came as a refugee from East Bengal to West Bengal, got married to him, and the two of them raised 5 sons. You know, I wish we had sisters, but we just 5 sons. The oldest brother, he became a bureaucrat. The second brother, he became, you know, he joined the Indian Air Force. The third brother became a lawyer, and suddenly, for no reason, abandoned his family for 12 years and became a monk. So he went from place to place to place, no income, no liabilities, just with his one piece of loin cloth, went all over the place, and finally came back, but generally renounced the world. The fourth brother, he joined the army, then became a banker. And here I am. I started as a lower division clerk in a government office, worked there for a year, and then became a management trainee. Then the IT industry was coming up, joined the IT industry, but you know, finally I co-founded a company. So if blood was the common thing, the 5 brothers would be all doing the same thing or similar things. We think very differently. You know, if 5 of us are in the same room, we may even kill each other. Okay? So if blood is so dominant a factor, and it's happening in your own family, your sister and you, okay, are so different. And when you grow up, you can sometimes, unless you are reminded that you're siblings, you sometimes say, you know, how is this guy even talking like this? Okay? So we need to remind ourselves of that, because when we put it all on blood and all on DNA, we actually disrespect Mother Nature. Because the same Mother Nature has gifted us with the neocortex, which keeps growing even outside of the mother's womb. And there's a connection between nutrition and your capability to think. So that is why we talk about child nutrition as such a very important thing. So you have great blood, great DNA, and you don't have proper nutrition. So that is why a child from a rural part of India has a disadvantage. That disadvantage is not a disadvantage of blood, that's a disadvantage of nutrition. Access to sanitation. World Bank report establishes a connection between sanitation and IQ. Now, is IQ inherited? IQ not inherited? How much is nature? How much is nurture? So we have to have deep belief in human ability. We have to have deep belief in learnability of the human mind. Because when there's learnability, ideas will grow on ideas. And it is not an individualistic thing alone. You can't be one breakthrough thinker, one great innovator. The power of collaboration is very important, which goes back to her question, which relates to the idea of giving and taking. Some people will take much better than other people. So when we are good takers, the world will come and drop things in our hand. And then with all those things, we can innovate. So, sir, that was my first part. And again, I must tell you that you people know a lot more than I do. And my mind, my conversation is not necessarily a scientific left brain analytical conversation. I'm like a mendicant who's learned something here, something there. But this is how I feel. This is how I believe. The other very important thing is from an anthropological, sociological perspective, we talk about the concept of you treat somebody as a flower seller, that person will remain a flower seller. You treat a flower seller like a princess, and she will behave like a princess. This is called the Pygmalion effect. Okay, so you take the most well DNA endowed child and disrespect that child and mistreat that child and don't feed that child properly, that child will fall off. But you take the average, so-called average child and give the right environment, that child will rise. And if you look at the history of humanity, the most significant achievements have been done when ordinary people have come together and they have done extraordinary things. So there is power in ordinariness. There is enormous potential in the average, and we need to be respectful of that. So there was a second part of your question, which professorially I've forgotten. So please.
Serendipity.
Serendipity is very important. Serendipity is not what necessarily we think it is. Serendipity is about emergence. I'm walking in a path. Should I be so blinkered that I think it is me, myself, my thinking and my problem that I'm trying to solve? Or sometimes, like she was again saying, let go. Let events unfold. Let other forces come and contribute. A river becomes a river. If you look at the origin of any river, it starts very small. And then it flows. There's a serendipity in that flow. And as it flows, other rivers come and join. As those tributaries come, the expanse of the river becomes so big that there's a significant difference between the source and what the river looks at its confluence, because a river is willing to accept serendipity. But I tell my leaders all the time that as thinkers, doers, please respect white space time. Don't fill up your day only with activities. Create white space, because when the mind is in a white space, the mind becomes like a lake, and you are watching that mind sitting at the brink of the lake, and you are so quiet that you can hear the sound of a drop of water in the middle of the lake. So there is power in white space. There is power in serendipity. But serendipity does not mean waiting for Lady Luck to come and touch our head with the magic wand. Serendipity is about respecting emergence. Serendipity is about, letting other forces come together, because sometimes life is way too complex. It is not an if, then, else statement. Thank you, sir, for the great question. Thank you.
Ritesh Phalke from MBA faculty in Pimpri Chinchwad College asks, is it necessary to be the first in innovation? Do I have to be the first one?
No, it's a most overrated idea. You know, if you are racing against others, then you may fail to race with yourself. So don't be obsessed about being the first. Be obsessed about being good, and be obsessed about creating huge value for a lot of people. By the way, the MP3 player preceded the iPod. Okay. Apple was not the first company to come out with an MP3 player. MP3 players were, there for probably 7, 8, 9 years prior to Apple iPod. And Apple iPod is nothing but a good-looking MP3 player. But Apple did it very differently, waited for its time. So no need to be first. Who knows the names of great MP3 player makers now? Nobody knows. So be very good. Apple was very good. Apple was very sensitive to people's need, sometimes unstated needs. And then Apple created an affordable product that will be adapted by a huge number of people. It's important. Many times in India we confuse about that. If there's no adaptation of what we create, the products, the services, the books, the technologies that we write, then you bloom like a flower in the jungle, and you drop in the jungle, and the world does not even know what your perfume is like. So don't be obsessed about being first. Be obsessed about being valuable in a sustainable way. Life is not as short as you think. Make sense?
There is an interesting question. I hope I have understood it well. Which type of innovation can change the life of tribes in Chhattisgarh, Bihar, where they are unable to even meet the basic necessities?
I think we need to fix water. The Prime Minister has his priorities right. We talk about Swachh Bharat, but the average water requirement for flushing for many Indians is 40 liters. In White Chhattisgarh, the state that I come from, parts of Maharashtra, parts of any Indian state, people walk miles to bring drinking water. Where's the water to flush? We need to fix water as a problem. We need to fix basic health issues as a problem. It's not without reason that we are the blindness capital of the world. We are the malaria capital of the world. And by the way, we think of geriatrics as a very urban problem. There's a serious geriatric problem of physical disability, of dementia, of isolation and neglect as much in rural India. So we need to address simple things about life and living. In Bangladesh, Mohammad Yunus has been engaging with Danone for a long time. Danone is one of the largest yogurt makers and food makers in the world. So Danone created a social venture along with the Grameen Bank many years back to create a highly nutrient yogurt that will be good for the children of Bangladesh, because the Bangladesh children are one of the most malnutritioned in the planet. And that happens because you don't get the micronutrients. We eat a lot of food, but food has micronutrients. A growing up child, if doesn't get micronutrients of the adequate amount, that cannot be rectified later in life. So that is connection to how your brain works and evolves. So Danone was working with Grameen Bank to create a low-cost special yogurt which will be rich in micronutrients, such that a child needs only two helpings twice a week. And if the child has that for 3-4 years, will not have any nutritional disability in later part of the later part of the life. So when the R&D people of Danone presented this micronutrient to Mohammad Yunus, it was given to him in a cup, And so he listened. It was a great thing. Then Yunus asked, so what will happen to the cup after the thing has been eaten? So the scientists were not ready for that. They were startled. You know, they were trying to present micronutrients, which were scientific breakthroughs, and here's a man saying, you know, what will happen to the dispenser? I mean, the not dispenser, the container. So Muhammad Yunus said, no, you don't understand. You know, poor people don't like to throw things away. Throwing things is a rich man's prerogative. Then the R&D people are startled, and then Muhammad Yunus said a nice thing. He said, we are poor people. Why couldn't you think about an edible container? So I'll have the dahi, but I will also chew the container. Now Mother Nature mostly ships her stuff in edible containers. Don't try to eat the coconut shell. But the apple, aloo, okay, the baigan, everything, the kela, okay, the chiku, are all edible. You may not eat the cover of the, you know, kela's outer, you know, the kela's cover, but another animal will. So why not an edible container? So if we want to align ourselves with Chhattisgarh, my request is first go live in Chhattisgarh. I talked about inclusion. Include Chhattisgarh at an existential level, not at an adaptive level. Go beyond intellectual searches. Go embrace that and then solve a life problem, which may be nutrition related, water related, okay, something very basic. Keep it so simple that it hurts. I think we have run out of time.
Yeah, but the last question by Dr. Chitrai.
My question is related to the industry, student around. About 20 years back, when total quality management entered into industry, there were a lot of initiatives like quality circle, suggestion scheme, small group activity. When people were working for suggestion scheme, we have a lot of innovative ideas. But later on it was found, we failed to develop that culture in the industry. That is my observation as a researcher. Any specific, what is required to be done to create that culture in any work life, not only industry I'm talking about, because when it comes to boss to subordinate, somehow the supervisor will tell junior workers, we don't think, thinking is an R&D job. That is somehow the culture. Same quality circle giving a lot of results in Japanese, because it's a Japanese concept. But we failed to, we gave very good results, no doubt, but somehow we have not developed that culture.
Yeah, it's a very complex question. I have been an avid student of, the whole quality idea. Went to Japan to train on quality. Looked at the close connection between social thinking. Okay. In Japan, the quality circle worked because Japan is an island. Okay. It's remained an island, for as long as we can think about. And there's a great amount of emphasis on the idea of harmony. Okay. Harmony is very important to the Japanese. So when, in Japan even today, you can't push things down only top down. So they created this idea of top down and bottoms up. But the top down bottoms up was about harmony, and it's a very respectful culture. When you are respectful, which has an implication in terms of the export of Buddhism and their embracing of Buddhism, when you're respectful, then you collaborate far more, you listen far more. Culture is a very complex thing. It is like the rainforest. What makes culture what it is very difficult to pinpoint. It's the interconnection between the flora and the fauna and the microbe that I talked about. But what is very important, is more than trying to decode how culture gets established. It is to focus on building what I call the fertility condition on the ground. How can you do that? First of all, you have to have a respect for the notion that it cannot be done overnight. In India particularly, we dispense things, we discard things which do not lead to instant gratification. We give things 6 months time, 1 year time, then we just give up. Okay? So we need to understand that some things will be long-acting, like establishing a culture of harmony without making it monochromatic, where everybody is looking the same, thinking the same. Second very important thing to do is to encourage right brain ideas with left brain ideas. Teach physics and theater in adjacent classes and sometimes remove the barrier between the two. Give as much respect for people who do manual work, work through with their hands, and scientifically study what can you actually learn from them. So right brain, left brain, respect dissension. When somebody is intolerant, it is going against building a culture where true quality, as against TQM, as against ISO 9000, as against SCI level 5. Now those are compliance-ridden ideas. So true quality is actually very existential. It operates at the highest level where you are creeping into the mind. Now that kind of a thing cannot happen without both harmony and also a multicultural approach to things, respect for dissension, openness to critical thinking. We lack in India in recent times, through the way that we work, through the way that we teach, is critical thinking. And openness to failure. We need to be open to failure. I keep telling my leaders that, don't worry about failing, but make sure that when you fail brilliantly. You fail so well that the whole country, the town comes, the city comes and says, wow, what a magnificent failure. On that note, thank you very much, and it's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such an enriching experience to us. We truly know how innovations can come from simplicity and harmony. From all our students and our faculty members, we thank you again. Can we have a big round of applause for? I would now request our Vice Chancellor to please present our guest with a memento as a token of our appreciation from the entire University of Pune. I would now ask the HOD of our department, Dr. B.V. Sangvikar, to please grace our stage, without whose support and motivation this morning wouldn't have been possible.
Good afternoon to everyone. I am here to propose a vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank our today's speaker, Mr. Subroto Bagchi, for his wonderful session on this topic of innovation. It was a very motivating and enriching interactive session for all the participants. We are thankful for your valuable guidance to all the students and faculty members. I am also thankful to Mrs. Bagchi for her gracious presence on this occasion. I would like to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Gade, for his opening remarks and motivation to all the students. I would like to thank our today's invited guest, Mr. Chinmay Bhagwat, Mr. Abhay Patil, and Mr. Kiran Bhagwat for their presence. I would like to thank all the head of the departments, teachers, and students for their live participation. Also, I would like to thank Mr. Hadikar, Mr. Akshay, Dr. Verma, students of Pumba, for helping organizing this particular event. Thank you so much.